In this video, we're going to create a project that will turn this website into a REST API. So you can see that I have a list of products and I can edit and delete each one of them and show the details. So if you haven't seen this, you can go back and see some previous tutorials in my playlists and you can get up to date here. So what we're going to do then is go from this stage right here into another stage. So let's open this tab here. So you can see in the URL that I inserted a new feature. It's called the API. And I am searching for the products for the word soup. So that's exactly what I did in the previous, where I had search results and you can see everything is coming up soup. But in this case, instead of rendering a web page with HTML code, we are going to render a JSON data list. So you can see the little square bracket says this is a list or an array, and then each little curly bracket represents one object. So we're going to see a bunch of objects that are going to have to be rendered by a client. So the point is we're trying to create a REST API. So the search works very well in the web browser. However, we have another program that we're going to use. This is Postman. And Postman is going to act like a web client, except it does everything, not just the GET requests or the search requests. So I have several searches that I've saved, and we're going to go through these in the tutorial. The first one is search, and it says it's called search sandwich, but I changed it to soup. If I put in the word sandwich up here and then clicked the send button, we should get a result from the server, and it should show us any sandwiches that are in the list. So it looks like there are two. And so I created sandwich and mega sandwich. Those are both results. And that is the first result that we're going to make. There's a put statement here. So in the language of APIs, put means we're going to do an update. And so the action that we're going to create in the put is to process, edit, return one item. And so in this case, we are going to have an update to one of the products. So to make a put work, we're going to have a body to our request, which we're just going to provide a JSON data. You can see I've selected JSON here. And for item number 2, I'm going to change this to really big tacos, Mexican. And when I push send, I should get a request status down here that says 200 was okay. And so now in the database, we should have the words really big tacos. Let's check to see if we can find tacos here. So I'm going to go back and put in the word taco and see what the results are. And sure enough, we have really big tacos Mexican. So you can see where we're going. We're going to have another event here called insert one. And the insert command is also going to require something in the body. And so if we have a mega 2 sandwich in my list in my body, and I choose send, we should get a creation message that says okay. And now if I were to search for that, I would have another sandwich. So the insert command is going to work as well. And then finally there's a delete. And so the delete is going to remove one, obviously. So we're going to provide it a number and it will remove. So all of these actions here are what we can do with the REST API. So now let's get to the code in Visual Studio and actually make these happen. So that's what we're going to do next. So let's return to Visual Studio and pick up where we left off in the last project. So our project here has a controller called Products Controller. Let's just review to see what actions we've made and what we can use now in this new version of it. So the Products Controller has all of the actions that you would expect. So index was to return a list of all of the products. So we're going to confirm that. We're going to use that again. There's a search. We're going to also modify this so that it will be used for searching. The search form, this here job is only to display a view, so we will skip that one. But we're going to modify various pieces of this. So rather than go ahead and mess up this controller, which is working just fine, we're going to make a new controller based on this one. So let's go to the copy and paste routine. So I'm going to right click, copy, and then right click on the controllers folder and paste so we have a new one. So now we have a products controller that says copy. Well, instead of calling it copy, I'm just going to put in the word or the suffix here as API. So that way we have two versions of the same controller. Now we have to reference these differently in our routes, but we'll be able to do both jobs on this one application. So I look over at the errors now that have come up here, and it says you've already got a products controller and now you've got another one. So we need to make a reference, or we need to make a name change. So I'm going to rechange this to API, and then for the constructor we're also going to put API in there. And so now they are unique, so they don't conflict with each other. So the first thing I'm going to do to make this different is I'm going to add some declarations here just before the class name. So first of all, I'm going to define this as an API controller. And so this is going to tell the application to expect certain things, that this is not a regular controller. And then I'm going to give it a route. So the route that I'm going to insert here is the letters API and then a slash. Now I could put the controller name in here, or I can just leave it as a slash if there's no other controllers doing this job. So right now I only have products in my application, so I'm not going to tell it to specify the controller name. If I had more than one thing, I would put in another optional parameter here. So this will tell us the route to get to this controller. The next change that I'm going to make is to tell the controller that it's derived, or it's implementing a different class or a different implementation of an interface. And so this is the controller base rather than the controller. So controller base is one item up in the pyramid of inheritance. Okay, so let's scroll down and now start to modify each of these individual items. So let's work on the index action first. So the first thing I'm going to do is define what kind of request can be used in this event. And so what I'm looking for is called a GET request. So the GET request is usually used for fetching data, and index is supposed to fetch a list of items. Then we're going to remove the error down below that says what we're returning. So it says you're trying to return a view, and views don't work now with a REST API. So we'll just remove that, and we're going to return a list of all products. Now look at the item up on the defining line on 23. We need to tell the item what kind of data is being returned. Well, we're returning a list of all products. So I'm going to put in a bracket lists and the product model as the type. And so that will return, hopefully, the data we want. Now we get another error. My goodness, the error keeps coming. So iActionResult is no longer valued. It's no longer legitimate, I guess. And so we'll change that to just the word action result. And then finally, instead of providing a list, which is just fine, there's no problem with a list, I'm going to use the interface that the list implements. And so iEnumerable is the interface that implements list as well as other things that contain items of data. So things that are enumerable mean things like lists and sets and other items like that. So list is by far the most common. So when we're done here, we have a different definition that is going to produce a list of products, but it will format it in JSON data for us. That's what the whole point of a REST API is. Now I want to test this out, but there's all kinds of errors left in the rest of the actions. So let's just comment out all the actions. So /* will begin the comment block, and then I'll scroll down to the very last item and I will put the ending block for the comments. So when we are finished here, we will have only one event in this API controller, but it should work. Let's test it out and see what kind of results we get. All right, so the application's up and running, and we can still see the web page. So that hasn't gone away. I can still get the products if I click on the URL in the nav bar, and we should see a list of all the items and displayed in their cards and their table format, just like we did earlier. Now what I want to do is check out this new item. So I'm going to erase this and put in the letters API and press enter and see what kind of results we might get from this request. So you can see my browser is producing a bunch of JSON data, and it does say that we have some problems with highlighting the text because there's way too much information. But you can see that the format, if it were more readable, would make sense. We have ID2, the name of the guy, and everything else that follows. And so it looks like the index method is working. Let's go and fix some of the other ones. So let's move down to the next action. So the next action in this controller is called search products. we'll follow the example of what we did before. So we'll change the action result from I action result, and then we will remove the view statement. For the data type that is returned, it is I enumerable of type product model. Make sure that we spell it all right so that the errors go away. Now the last thing we need to do is tell it what kind of request this is. This is also a GET request, so let's put in HTTP GET at the top, and then we are ready to test this one out. Now in addition to saying that this is a GET request, I'm also going to tell it what the URL is that we're expecting. So you can see that the search products is expecting a string called search term. So we have to define that in our URL. So I'm going to use search products as the URL, and then we're also going to provide it with a slash and curly brackets to tell it that this is going to be expected as an optional parameter. So the curly brackets means this is like put an extra slash, and things like the words taco or soup, that's what we would be expecting to be input. Now I've got some errors here, and it looks like I have forgotten to put in the closing quotation marks here. So let's insert that before the parentheses, and the error goes away. Okay, let's see if this will work. So I'll run the application and see how this goes. Okay, the application's up and running. So let's move the browser down a little bit so I can see what my expected input is here. So search products slash search term is what I'm after. So remember, for this guy, I have to put in the API for the controller title, a slash, and then this new item called search products, and then a term. So let's search for soup and press enter and see what comes back. So you can see that the search results in the browser do yield something. So we have item 13 and 23 and probably dozens of others. And so this here is the results of the search products. Let's put in here a different word. Let's try pizza and see if we get any pizzas. And it looks like we have 2 pizzas in our records. So the browser here is a good client if all you need to do is fetch data. So this is for searching products and displaying all of the products in the database. However, there's another tool. So I have installed on my computer the application called Postman. So to get Postman, you go to postman.com/downloads and get the application for what your operating system is. So you have to register, and then once you are registered, it keeps track of everything that you've ever searched for, which is a very handy thing when you start doing a lot of testing. So after you've installed the app and run it, you can open up this screen here. So this is the main screen. So Postman, his job is to do requests just like I saw in the browser. So your version of Postman will not have all the history that you see over here. However, you'll see the good afternoon or good morning, and then I'm going to click the plus on the tabs, and we'll have a new request. So you can see that the different kinds of requests here are different than what you get in your web browser. So we're going to start with GET, which is the simplest one, and which we've already demonstrated. So selecting GET, I'm going to go back to the web page, and I want to copy one of my results here. So let's copy the pizza request, and let's put this over into the Postman. So in this line here where it says enter the URL, we'll choose paste, and you can see we have to make sure that we got all the data in here just as the web browser used it. And let's search. So let's choose a send, and it says we're sending, and the results come back in the bottom window. So let's expand to see a bit more of that window, and it looks to me like we've got a couple of items for pizza. So let's change this from pizza to a different word. Let's see if we have any beer in our set, and sure enough, we've got some beer as well. So this result down below is the JSON data. So there's different formats, as you can see, and make sure that you get the right one. So it's supposed to be JSON, and I think it automatically senses that, but what you want is to see this. Also, check out here, it says here the status is okay. That means that the request was met without any errors. If you get other errors you've probably recognized, such as 404, which can't find it. So for instance, if you were to change this from search products to search products X, this obviously is not something I've programmed. And so when I choose send, I will get a different result that says 404 not found. And if you have an error in your code and the server crashes, you will get like a 500 error. So this here is a great tool that tells you what went wrong or gives you the results if things go right. So we're going to use Postman now because it does more than just fetching. It does updates and deletes as well. So let's go back to our code and add some more features to our API. So let's keep moving down the list. Now the next item that I come across in my version of the application is called search form. Yours might be in a different order. So search form, his job is to display a view, it says. Probably the data entry form when we try to perform a search. Well, in a JSON application, we don't have any forms to enter in. We just enter things through the browser's URL. And so for this, we can either leave it as commented or we can delete it. So I'm going to take it out of the way, so I'll just delete it. Now the next one down is in my application is show one product. So this looks to me like a legitimate JSON request. So I'm going to move the little comment marker from above and paste it below. So now let's change this one into a REST API. So to make all these features work properly, we first of all are going to set the type of request. And so once again, this is a GET request. We're just fetching data. So GET is the word we're looking for. And I want to use the action name. So show one product. I'll copy and paste it into the GET request format. And I'm also expecting a number. So let's put a slash and then the parameter name, which is a capital ID. Now we're going to remove the I from action result. We're going to remove the view. And then we're going to change the return type to whatever we're expecting to get back from our database, which in this case is not a list of items. It is a single item. So this will not return an array. It will return one object. Let's see what this does with our GET requests in our testers. Okay, so I launched the application. I see the welcome screen. I'm going to move the browser down so I can see the item behind. So show one product is the idea that I'm looking for. So I'm going to put in /API and show one product. And you notice it doesn't matter if I use capital letters or not. And then a slash and I need a number. So I believe 22 is a product that I saw earlier. It might or might not work, but let's see what happens if I choose 22. And sure enough, it looks like 22 was cookie dough. So 22 produces one item. Now, I don't know if you realized it, but before there was a beginning square bracket for all our search results. Now I have a single bracket because, well, this is just a single object and the other ones were multiple. So just to test that out, I'm going to duplicate the tab and then change the action from one product to search products, and let's search for soup. And the results come back with multiple items. So you can see that in this case, the return object is a square bracket, and then there's a whole bunch of objects in between. So each of these is an individual item. So it's important because when you get to producing a user front end, you're going to have to understand the difference between an array of JSON or JSON array and a JSON object. So this is an array, and the first results that we produced was a single object, not an array. So just to make sure that you understand what you're seeing. Okay, so this seems to work in the browser. It should also work in the Postman. So this Postman request has already been done. I'm going to this time save it, and let's give it a name. So I'm going to give it a request name as search products with beer. And we have collections that we can add. So let's create a collection here, and I'm going to call this my products searches. Or I'm going to call this thing my products application. If you wanted to put the description in here to see what it is, you could. And let's see, can I do anything else? I have to create the collection, it says. And then choose the check mark. And now it looks like it's in the products here, and let's save it. So now I go to the collections tab, and you can see that I have a products application with one request saved. So I've saved these earlier, and I'm going to collapse them so that they look like they're hidden. And we're going to make a collection here. So the first one is called search products beer. Now let's make a new request. Let's go back to our browser, and this one here was show one product. So that's the next thing we're going to try. So let's copy him. I'm going to open up a new tab in the Postman, put in the requests. So the request is show one product and 22. Let's see what happens when I send it. And we get a request results, and cookie dough comes back just like it did in the browser. So far so good. Now let's save this one so that way we can come to it later. And for the name here, let's call this thing search for by ID. Okay, so we're going to call it search product by ID. And I've got the products application collection down here and save it. And so now I've got two different searches that I've done, and I can come back to them at any time. So moving right along on downhill, let's go to the next item. So this one here is pretty much a duplicate of what we were trying to do in an earlier stage. This one returns JSON format. So in one sense, if you just return JSON format for everything, you'd get a REST API. Instead, we're actually implementing a REST API in the proper way, I guess you'd call it. So for this guy, I don't need him again. We've already got this, so let's delete it. So the next one is to show the edit form. Now, showing forms, once again, is not required when we do JSON. So let's delete him. What do we got now here? Process edit. So this one here is going to be very important. It's going to actually work. We're going to need to do what's called a put request. And before we get to that one, I'm going to do a simple insert. So processing edit is different than inserting, but inserting seems to make more logical sense. So further down, I find insert one. So this is the item that I want to do next. We'll do inserts before we do edits. So let's cut this one out and move it outside of the commented block. So I'm going to come up to the section here and paste. So insert one, what kind of an idea do we want here? So for this action that we're going to create is going to not be a get, but a post. So we'll do HTTP post and then the action name in parentheses and a string. So let's put some comments in here to understand what we're expecting this to work like. And eventually this will go into the documentation for the end user. So we're expecting a post. And also we're expecting that the body of the requests have some data in it. So we're going to have to put this in together with Postman. The web browser won't work anymore. So we're going to have JSON formatted data in the body of the request, and that will be interpreted as the item here called product, which is the parameter that is going to be inserted into the database. So now let's go ahead and modify the code for this action. So we're going to change from iActionResult to actionResult. We're going to get rid of the view. As a matter of fact, I'm going to delete the entire list here. I don't want to just return an entire list of products every time I insert a new one. In this case, I want to just return the value of whatever the new ID number is. So remember, when you create a new ID in a database, it's automatically generated by the database server, and it's returned as an integer. So let's return the new ID value. Now we've got a problem here. When I look at the code, it says that you must have a declaration here in brackets. So this is the type of data and not an integer itself is being returned. So there, now we got ourselves the error message to go away. So how did I know that this was supposed to be an integer? Well, I just have a good memory. So let's double check to make sure that it's what I expected. So I'm going into the services folder. A long time ago we programmed this. So the I product data services is the interface, and the insert command does return an integer as its value. So it seems like I'm right there. Let's go look at the implementation in the product DAO. And so let's go find the insert command on this one. So there's delete, get product by ID, insert. So the insert is producing a value called the new ID number. And you can see that the new ID number is after we converted this scalar command into an integer, and then it returned the new ID number. So that's the intent here. So when we insert a new product, let's get the product ID number and send it back as an integer. So I don't need to look at this anymore. I was just confirming that it was actually an integer that was returned. And so sure enough, so we should see a new integer ID returned if we insert correctly. Now let's go and insert somebody into our database. So to do that, we have to launch the program and then use Postman. So the application ran. It didn't crash, fortunately. However, I can't use the browser anymore because I'm using a post request here, and so I'm going to go into Postman. So Postman, let's create a new tab, and let's get the, maybe we'll start with the URL up to the API point. So I'm going to copy him and put him into the untitled, paste. So what's after the API? Let's double check in our code. So it is supposed to be insert one. So let's copy insert one and put that in our URL. Now we need to have more data than this, because what are we going to insert? We have to use what's in the body. So far we've ignored this section called the parameters. So we could put all those key values in, but that's a little tedious. What I'm going to do instead is switch to the word body, and then I want to show this in the format of JSON data. So to find that, I choose raw, and then over here instead of text, I have the option of saying expect JSON data to come in here. So now I could either type this out, or better, I'm just going to copy and paste it from somewhere else. The somewhere else is I have an example of what a product looks like. So let's switch back into the previous where we had a item, and we're going to copy it, and then I'm going to put it into the body. So the body is the top section. Don't put it in the response, put it in the top section. So when we insert, we do not have to provide the ID number. So I'm just going to highlight that, including the comma, and delete it. And we need a new product name. So instead of cookie and chocolate chip, let's try in hot dog or some other thing. And then you come up with a price. This hot dog is expensive. And then I'm going to shorten all of this description text because it looks rather long to me. And let's see, there's a lot of spaces at the end. So there's a little bit of a description. So we have 3 items. Hot dog is the name, price, and description. Now, if this works, the body will be recognized and we will get a response. So let's send it. Okay, so I have an error. You can see 405 showed up. It says your method is not allowed. Did I program it wrong? Not really. Look at the type of request that I put up here. By default, requests are set to guest or get. So I told it in my code that get is not what we're expecting. We're expecting a post. So post is used when you are putting data into the database. So you can see that the previous items have this little green get in front of them. Now the request changed to post. Let's see if post works any better, as the API is expecting that. So send it away, and what do we get? So after a little bit, I got an OK response, so a 200. I was expecting an integer. I didn't expect to get 0, so maybe my code isn't working like I hoped. But we should have a hot dog in our list that is $125. Okay, so let's go see if we can find the hot dog in our database. So hot dog is what we inserted, and it should be $125. So I'm going to go back to the search, and I have search for beer, and I forgot that there's an X in the end of that, so let's take him out. And instead, let's put in the word hot dog and see if we get any results. So we send it, and sure enough, we got a hot dog, and it's $125, and the ID is now 4001. So that's a pretty big number compared to the others that I've been using. So it appears that the database now has a hot dog in it of 4001. Let's see if 4001 can be found when I do a search by ID. So in this tab, instead of a 22, let's put in 4001 and do a send, and we get the same hot dog. I bet if we put in a different number like 4002, we will get no response. So no content. So didn't get anything back. So it appears that the hot dog has been inserted and its value is 4001. So now let's return to our code and make some more modifications. Let's see if we can get the process edit to work. So I'm going to cut out the process edit and move it above the comment marker. And now we're going to turn this into a REST API. So first of all, this is not a post. What do we have for edits? So it doesn't say update anywhere. You'd think that update would be one, but the command we're looking for is called put. So put is what corresponds to update. Now let's go through the rest of the process of changing the format. So we are going to remove the return item. No longer do we return a list of views or a view of a bunch of things. We're just going to return whatever was sent to us, so the product. So this will tell us what was updated. The repository update command is going to have to be triggered. And now for the top for the the type of data that we're expecting. We'll change it to iAction result to action result, and tell it that a product model is what we expect to return. So now we have a few things to put into the comments. So the way this works is that in the body of the request, we are going to expect a JSON formatted product. And in this case, we're not going to modify anything in the ID column. So the ID will stay the same, but name, price, and description can change. That's what the point of an edit is. And so this should hopefully result in a returned product. Now I noticed an error in my logic here, that I'm just going to return the product that was sent to me. What if the actual database operation fails? So I'm going to return whatever I put into the database. So the statement repository.getProductById and then get that item will just double check to make sure that the update actually did occur. So you can see from the return statement, you'll get to see if or not there was any changes made to the product. Let's test this out and see how it looks. So once the application is launched, I know that the server's working. Let's go to Postman and see if we can make some updates here. So I think this one here, this post was not saved. So let's go and save this as an insert command, and then we can move on to the next one. So let's see, this was called insert 1, and let's just go ahead and save it to the products application right there. So now I want to do an update. So let's take a look at a new tab, and let's put in an update. Where are we going to get the code? First of all, let's get process edit. That's not update, but it's the same process. So process edit is what I'm looking for. So let's switch into Postman, and let's see, process edit. Well, let's see, I'm missing the first part of this. So let's go and copy all of the items right up to API and put it in front of process edit. Okay, so now we got process edit. The expectation is that the body is going to contain the item that's going to be updated. So let's format this as JSON text, and then let's go copy and paste somebody. So let's go back to our hot dog and copy him. So I don't want to copy from this guy. He doesn't have his ID number. Let's go and search product by ID number. Did we get anything here? 4001, I believe, was the name. So let's just research for him and get product 4001. Now the point of getting product 4001 or any product was to have something to edit. So I'm going to copy all of the items from the result here, and let's go into the process for, what was this? Process edit. So we're pasting in, and then I'm going to modify this. So keeping the ID number from hot dog, let's call this thing a big hot dog, and let's lower the price from $125 to just $5, and then leave the description alone. So let's see what happens. Will this work? Probably won't, but we'll find out why in a minute here. So I choose a send, and I get another 405. So what did I do wrong this time? Can you figure it out? The result is that I forgot to change this from get to the type of request that an edit is using. So the request is called put. So I'm going to update using put, and let's see if that works any better. So this time I got a result that says it's okay, and the result was big hot dog. So that should be the new data. Let's go and see if we can get the search product by ID. So this is the request for getting one. Let's send it for 4001, and sure enough, the text does show that it was different. So the update did occur. So let's return to our controller code, and I think we have one more action to complete here. So looking down, we have an item called process edit with a partial return. So I don't really care about that one because it's returning HTML code. Delete one, though, is one that's new. And then the others are show create form, message, and welcome. They have nothing to do with our program, so I'm just going to delete those now. So the last one to implement here is the delete form. So let's cut him and let's move him up above the comment marker. So the modifications for this event are to put in the type of request that we're expecting. So this one here sounds pretty obvious. It's delete, HTTP delete. Now the URL is to have the word delete one. So we're going to take the action name and put it in the URL. And then we're expecting in the URL to have a number. So the little curly brackets indicate that this is a parameter, and it has to match the parameter name ID with a capital I. Now we're going to wipe out iActionResult, change it to result, action result. We're going to use a Boolean as the return type because that is what the database is returning to us. We're going to do the processing in the database, and then I'm going to return whatever the database function returns, which in this case is a Boolean. So I'll call the variable success and save it, and then return the success statement as the return in the JSON object. So let's see what happens when I try to delete the hot dog. Okay, so I launched the application. I got the web page that says welcome. Let's switch into the Postman, and now let's switch to a new tab. So this one here is going to be a delete action. So let's go back to our search, and let's borrow from here and copy and paste. So the new one is going to be not show one product, but it was supposed to be something about delete. Now I've already forgotten what that code was, so I'm going to go back and copy delete one from the code. Okay, let's go back into Postman and tell it paste. So I know that 4001 in my case was the hot dog. So go pick a number that you know is in the database and type it in here. Now before I send it away, I'm going to not forget this time to change the type. So we're looking for delete, and let's go ahead and send it. So I got a return, and it says here false. I expected a true actually. So did it actually delete it? Maybe my my database code isn't programmed like I thought it was. So I did get a Boolean. Let's see if we have any hot dogs. Let's go back and search for the product by ID. So 4001 used to be in the database. I predict that it is now gone. So let's send it away. And sure enough, we have a 204, which says no content, and I got a 1 that came back. So hot dog appears to be gone. Let's see if we can search for hot dogs. So this one here says search products for hot dogs, and I send it, and now I have an empty list. So let's we got one more thing here to finish up. So for this delete action, let's save it, and let's give it a name and call it delete1, and put it into our collection. And then I think the other put request did not get saved as well, so this was the edit. So let's save him, and let's do an edit as the request name and save that. So we've got a nice collection here. We've got search products, we've got look for one product, insert one, delete one, and edit. And that's an example of pretty much all of the types that you'll need. Now, depending on how you built your database, your functions here will obviously have to have different return types and different expectations on the body. But this is a pretty good example that you could use in future products. So using Postman and any tool like what we've got in front of us here where we build our REST API controller, you have now set up the back end for your project. So here's a secret. You don't have to use C# and Visual Studio to make this. It's easy to do in this process. You can do the same thing in Java. You can do the same thing in Python. You could use Node.js and write it in JavaScript. But the idea is you are going to create the backend that produces this JSON formatted data, and anyone in the world that uses it really doesn't know what you wrote the backend in. It could be like we did here, but it's an essential skill. So make sure that you include this in any projects and any portfolios that you want to show employers that you know how to do, because this is probably going to occur in your job somewhere. So we've reached the end here of the REST API. Congratulations on making one that works. And now we'll move on to more advanced projects using ASP.NET and C# in our web development.